Hello and welcome to the channel your parents, the PTA and the asleep don't want you to hear, the heliosblog. Today, Jordan Peterson must undergo training, sensitivity training, in a court ruling. Let's see where this one goes.
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
I'm perplexed, I would say, about the situation in Canada. I've been thinking about it this morning.
Sounds crazy.
As you know, the court that we appealed the College of Psychologists' decision to decided that the college it's within the college's purview to stop me from having any political opinions, as far as I can tell. The decision, which I
opposing the government, that's bad. You can't do that.
Posted on Twitter and will post in the description of this video, starts out by making a case for the fundamental reality of freedom of speech for Canadians in Canada.
Ha, okay.
And then says, but, and that's always a bad start when you're talking about freedom of speech, but apparently the college has the right to decide that I can be re-educated forcibly with the risk of my license, essentially because I made political statements that the members of the college don't agree with. And those
I see. So you're a dissident. You're an infidel. Bad man. Bad man. Destroy his career.
Those opinions involve two criticisms of Justin Trudeau, one criticism of his chief of staff, one criticism of an Ottawa city councillor, and then my objection on Joe Rogan to the climate apocalyptic fear-mongering that idiot tyrants are foisting on the general population. Now, apparently that makes me unprofessional and a disgrace to the profession, such that I am now going to be required, the college can go ahead with this, to put me into a re-education program with their so-called social media experts, and that's also, by the way, a profession that does not exist, until I learn my lesson, whatever that is, regardless of how much time that takes, by their judgment.
Perfect. So you must learn to be a robot for us. You must learn to speak, to say exactly what we want you to say. If you're not our puppet, we will destroy you. That's what it sounds like to me.
Or they can take my license away. And so the court says, well, of course you have freedom of speech, Dr. Peterson, but because you're a professional, you're bound by your professional organization. And apparently they're not bound, even though they're a government organization, fundamentally. Apparently they're not bound by that fundamental constitutional axiom. And so that shows you, all you Canadians who are listening, and everyone outside of the country who might be the least bit interested in Canada, that shows you exactly what our bloody Constitution is worth. And if Canadians are so daft that they don't think that that's a problem, well, they're going to figure it out over the next 15 years because there's
because this rips the top off of a gigantic problem, which is that any future person that goes against any organization that the government holds can be treated the same way. They can be, quote unquote, re-educated at will.
Absolutely no excuse for this. So that's what I'm thinking. Now, there's part of me that's thinking, well, look, Peterson, the College of Psychologists is after you. You've taken it to court. Now the judges have decided that you're wrong. Maybe you're wrong. And I think, well, I expressed political sentiment and I'm actually informed. And so for the life of me, I can't see how I'm wrong. I think I have a responsibility to say what I think, and I think many people agree with that, and I think the fundamental consequence of that around the world has been massively beneficial to people.
Indeed.
So I think number one, what the hell? And number two, bring it on and see what happens. Because I will make absolutely every bit of this public in a way that the college and the courts can hardly even imagine.
Indeed, Jordan has a gigantic global influence. You can't just you can't just tell him you can't speak freely. So what Jordan is effectively saying is, if the court will not be fair, I will force you to acknowledge that I am able to speak my mind. Do you know how powerful that is? That is insanely powerful. Great job, Jordan. That is extreme bravery. That is extreme bravery.
So away we go. So that's how I'm doing.
That's how you're doing. Okay, but good.
Yeah, but good. You know, I mean, I didn't look. The court decision was worse than I thought it would be. I was already pessimistic. I figured the court would take the coward's way out and basically upbraid the college for procedural inadequacy. Because one of the things the college did, which is just beyond comprehension as far as I'm concerned, is pursue these complaints that were put forward by people distributed all over the world, who then claimed in writing falsely to be my clients, when in fact they were never my clients. And not only were they not my clients, they had nothing to do with anyone who was ever a client of mine. And so I figured at least the court would say, well, you know, of course you have the right to police.
It's a psyop. It's a coordinated attack against Jordan.
Professionals, because you're a professional governing body, but they didn't even do that. They just basically said, well, of course you have the right to freedom of speech, except when it comes to, let's say, political opinions. So, you know, then what right do you have at all? And, you know, it's terrible, Michaela, because I know perfectly well from talking to many physicians in particular, but also lawyers and psychologists, that no one in Canada, arguably, and this is also extremely strange, it's surreal, there's no one in Canada except me that's actually in a position to fight this, because it's hyper expensive, and I don't know if my insurance will cover it. It's hyper expensive. It's stressful. It's complex. It's time consuming. It could involve the suspension of my license. And there's not really anything that can be done to me that's a threat. I'm not serving as a clinician. I don't have a practice anymore because that became impossible, even though I love doing it. And I'm also not very happy about that. So I'm like the person who can do this. And Canadians have no idea to what degree professionals in Canada are now required not to say what they think or to lie outright.
So that, exactly, you have to toe the company line or you get destroyed. That's what Jordan's saying. That is absurd. That is, let me use a different word, draconic.
For example, therapists are required by law to lie about, let's say, the gender identity of minors. And so for me, especially on the therapy side, if you're required by law and by your professional organization to lie cowardly, you're done as a therapist, because the only thing you've got as a therapist is honesty.
You can't be honest, you must lie. Interesting.
That's it. Honesty is what's curative. So
you can't be honest.
You know?
So it destroys the whole profession for political purposes.
It's just part of how surreal the world is, and particularly how surreal Canada is. It's hard to fathom.
Yeah, it is hard to fathom. Can I read just a couple of sentences from the decision so people have an idea of what's in here? It's linked below. People can read the entire thing. But there's parts, like this is how it begins. When individuals join a regulated profession, they do not lose their charter right to freedom of expression. At the same time, however, they take on obligations and must abide by the rules of their regulatory body that may limit their freedom of expression. That's just one sentence after another. That's how it starts.
Yeah.
So basically what they're saying is you have freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom of speech. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, perfect. It's a great thing to highlight. You know, it's like, well, you have this fundamental right, but
you
well,
don't.
but what? What rules? There's what? There's a rule, eh? There's a rule. Is that right? That the College of Psychologists has that I can't criticize Justin Trudeau on Twitter. That's a rule, is it? And if someone anywhere in the world complains about the fact that I've criticized Justin Trudeau, let's say, that all of a sudden that's a rule, even though it wasn't a rule. And of course I get to criticize Justin Trudeau, not only because he richly deserves it in every way you can possibly imagine, but because that's actually what freedom of speech means. So I have no idea what the court means by, you know, abiding by the rules. So the rules are whatever the bloody College of Psychologists determines constitutes a rule.
Basically, they own you, and they can make you say whatever you want, whatever they want.
After the fact, given their complete freedom to make manifest any rules they want.
Yeah.
It's beyond comprehension. And yes, but I have freedom of speech. It's like, do I now? What do I get to talk about? Apparently, I can't even talk about the weather. You know, here's another fact. This is literally the truth. People can submit a complaint to the College of Psychologists from anywhere in the world. And so someone in the States submitted a complaint about the last conversation I had with Joe Rogan, where I expressed my doubts about the validity of economic predictions based on climate science. The complainant submitted the entire transcript, right? A 3-hour conversation as evidence of my unprofessional behavior. And the college, which did not have to pursue that complaint, went forward with it. So like, okay, I talked to Joe for 3 hours. Apparently, everything I said in that 3 hours was unprofessional and a disgrace to the profession.
Interesting. Actually, what's funny is that Jordan has done for the field of psychology, right? Huge things, right? So to call him unprofessional is ridiculous. Why? Because he speaks his mind? That makes him unprofessional? Because he tells the truth? Yeah, truth tellers are the worst people in the world.
So, like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? The answer
It's another Socrates.
is, well, we're going to appeal the decision. I will take this to the Supreme Court. I don't think that any judges will have either the wisdom or the courage to rule about this properly, except at the Supreme Court level. And I'm not particularly optimistic about that either.
I'm not optimistic about that either.
He might have to leave Canada. He might have to leave the country.
I don't see how you can win this without overturning colleges in general. And I don't, like, that's not a good look for the colleges to lose this. So won't the Supreme Court, I know they're not supposed to be pressured, but won't they, what's the benefit for them for ruling in your favor? Other than
Well, the
withholding
benefit would
freedom
be
of
that they
speech?
support, well, they
Their own
would support the
constitution.
most fundamental principle of a free society, right? It's like, why do you have the right to freedom of speech? Well, the answer is because there's no difference between free speech and thinking, no difference between free speech and dialogue, and no difference between free speech and problem solving and negotiation. And so, and therefore peace. If you eliminate that, people can no longer think, they can no longer adapt, they can no longer negotiate, they no longer even know how to orient themselves in the world. And so, in principle, the advantage for the Supreme Court is that they rule in favor of the most fundamental principle upon which civil democracy itself is predicated. Now, I don't think we have the right to free speech in Canada. I think this decision today demonstrates that obviously. I saw the same thing with the Law Society in Canada. Partly was why I'm not surprised at this ruling. I've been through this before, and I see that Canada's walked down that idiot path for at least 30 years. So our country is in, well, this is where I start to get doubtful. It's like, either I'm wrong or the country is in trouble. Now,
Indeed.
to tell you the truth, I would rather be wrong. But I've thought it through. It's like, okay, what did I do exactly? None of my clients complained. That has nothing to do with this. And I expressed my political opinions, which I have a right to do, which I believe were correct. I think that, and Canadians agree with this now. The last poll indicated that Canadians believe that Justin Trudeau is the worst prime minister we've ever had.
Oh, man. What? That's insane. Unbelievable. So it's that bad in Canada? Okay.
Well, that was sort of my point a year ago, you know? And so if I can't say that, and yet a majority of Canadians believe it to be true, and believe me, a lot more of them are going to believe that. A lot more are going to believe that in the relatively near future. In what sense do I have anything even approximating freedom of speech? And if I can't have that opinion, and therefore, in principle, no one can, then what do we do when we're stuck with a prime minister, let's say, who everyone has decided is the worst prime minister the country's ever had? Well,
Move. Run, if you can.
well, this is another reason, you know, why I'm in a position that I can fight this, because the worst thing that could happen is the college can take away my license. Now, I already know that if my license gets taken away, there are other jurisdictions that will grant me a license the next day. And, you know, there's a real comedic element to that, because I could lose my license in Ontario and instantly be licensed in at least 3 other jurisdictions. And so that's not going to look very good with regard to the Ontario College of Psychologists.
Well, at least they got rid of you.
Well, and fair enough. And if that's what they want, I mean, the other problem that the college is going to face is that, and I don't know exactly what they're going to make of this, but all the people who are involved in this prosecution are going to find very soon that this will eat their life. So, you know,
From a media perspective.
I've offered,
Yeah.
well, I've offered to the college to negotiate. I actually have a solution in mind. And I've heard the odd comment indicating that maybe that's a possibility. I reached out a month ago with an idea. They haven't got back to me. I think they're waiting for this decision, to tell you the truth. And of course, they're going to be entirely emboldened by this. I know the solution, which I'm not going to discuss in this podcast. You know, I have to talk to them first. I have a reasonable solution. But, and I also know, or think I know, you know, you might ask, well, why is the college doing this? And my suspicions are, because we've been through this before. You know, when Cambridge University canceled the seminar I was going to conduct there on Exodus, I found out eventually that it was basically one person who was behind all of that. There were 2 more that were associated with that person who are pushing the college to go after me for whatever the hell their reasons are. You know, maybe they disagree with my political opinions, particularly on the trans front. And that was the tweet, I think, that really probably initiated all this, right? I tweeted about Elliot Page. And so I'm perfectly happy that I tweeted that particular tweet. And I also think in 5 years, nobody will admit that they were ever in favor of any of this, right?
And so it is. The wheels of history, right?
This is far worse than the lobotomies of the 1930s. This is inexcusable. You know, I read one poor kid today.
Indeed. Indeed. Indeed it is.
On Twitter,
Irreversible.
detransitioner was decrying his castration. Fancy that.
What a surprise.
And pointing out, for example, that, you know, he's a young guy. He has no sexual drive whatsoever. And he said, well, you know, what am I going to do? What have I...
That'll lead to a gigantic problem in the future. Yeah.
lost? I can't believe I was so stupid as to have gone through with this. It's like, you know, fair enough, kid. You probably should have woken up. But the people who facilitated that transformation, your therapists and your surgeons,
what happened
I think
to
it's
do no harm?
Indeed.
Yeah, right. I should also point out,
Gigantic
just so everyone is aware of this,
has been done.
surgeons are much more likely to be psychopathic than people in the typical profession. That's a well-documented phenomenon. in the psychological literature.
Right. So they
Now,
don't
it's
care.
not only surgeons, obviously. You see that in other professions as well. But if you happen to be sadistic and psychopathic, a profession that allows you to cut people up, and you think, well, there are no people like that. It's like, well, I think they just arrested some nurse in the UK for killing a bunch of babies in her psychopathic and sadistic manner. And so if you don't think there are people like that, you're naive beyond belief, and you better bloody well pray that you never meet anyone like that.
Absolutely.
Because they're looking for someone just as naive as you to have their way with.
There are countries now that have outlawed surgery for minors, transgender surgeries for minors. Like I believe Sweden has.
They didn't exactly
That would be probably smart.
outlaw it. I got corrected on that claim by Community Notes on Twitter. Well, what happened was they've restricted surgery to minors to clinical trials, which is, it's a detail. They've backtracked. There's no doubt Denmark, France, Sweden, the UK, Holland, the Netherlands, which is particularly relevant because that's where this gender-affirming surgical idiocy first made itself manifest. The Europeans have woken up to the fact that, well, you know what?
It's probably not a good idea.
Turns out that there's no evidence that sterilizing young people and cutting off their breasts makes them happier. Isn't that a shock?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think this is going to this is an argument that has to be had right now, and there's going to be such pushback from people who have gone through these surgeries starting now. It's already happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had some more things to read from the decision.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of other, I don't know if they're funny, but there are a couple of other parts just to clarify what's going on. Is this decision that they've come to ordered Dr. Peterson, as a registered member of the college, to complete a specified continuing education or remedial program, a SCRP, regarding professionalism in public statements.
Specified continuing education or remedial program. Sounds like a re-education camp.
The order's not disciplinary. It clarifies that here, and does not prevent. That's
Disaster. Liar.
It's good, right? It's not a punishment. You just have to pay for things you don't want to do. Yeah.
Right. I have to pay for things I don't want to do. It's also not specified. So that what's specified is that I have to be retrained. What's specified in the specification is that I have to be retrained, regardless of how long that takes, until the people who are responsible for the retraining have decided that I've learned my lesson. Right. So don't tell me that's specified, and don't bloody well lie, you pikers, and tell
Liar.
Tell me that that's not disciplinary. How pathetic can you get? It's like, if you're going to come after me, why don't you bloody well admit that you're disciplining me, which is absolutely 100% obvious, especially because you're also claiming that I deserve to be disciplined. It's like claiming you're in favor of freedom of speech and then telling me that, well, except that...
But...
you're a professional, and of course we wouldn't want...
Yeah, professionals can't have freedom of speech. No. Only regular people off the street. Not people with real jobs or responsibilities. No, those people can't have freedom of speech. You know what that sounds like? That sounds an awful lot like what communist countries did. They let's say unalived the intelligent population. They're silencing the intelligent population. Interesting thing to think about.
Want professionals to be able to, tell the truth or say what they think, because everyone wants their professionals to lie to them. Because
it's awful. To telling the truth.
That's how you get the best advice and guidance, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, they don't want you to get the best guidance. What they want you to get is the government-approved guidance.
I think what shocks me about this is you are basically being brought to task over the Joe Rogan podcast, one of the Joe Rogan podcasts, which is insane, and over political tweets. Like it says right here, a tweet on February 19th in which Dr. Peterson commented that an Ottawa city councillor was an appalling self-righteous moralizing thing.
An appalling, self-righteous, moralizing thing. Yeah, well, I used thing because I didn't want to get in trouble on the pronoun front.
Oh, well, I don't think that panned out well.
Well, we'll see. And so far, it's caused a certain amount of trouble. Okay, so there was the Ottawa City Councillor. Yeah. What other?
Tweet on January 2nd in which Dr. Peterson responded to an individual who expressed concern
Oh, this is savage. I've heard this one.
over overpopulation. That's how it's worded. And your response was, you're free to leave at any point.
The person actually said,
That's savage.
just so we get this right, that there were too many people on the planet. Now, I'm not very happy with that statement
Indeed.
at all, because I
Right.
listen to people. I listen to what people say. And when people say, well, there should only be 500 million people on the planet because that's what the planet can sustain, I think,
No, the planet can sustain many more than that.
what do you plan to do with the other 7,500,000,000? They're inconvenient, are they? And you,
Yeah.
what do you think they should be dispensed with? Just exactly what the hell are you saying?
Indeed.
And if you think that there are too many people, well, what makes you so sure that you're not one of them?
Exactly.
Especially if you're the one that's concerned about it. You know, if the lifeboat is too crowded to float, maybe the morally appropriate thing to do is jump off, right? To save everybody else. Not to pretend that, well, who is it? Is it the Africans who don't get to have fossil fuels, for example?
Right.
Is it people all over the world, the poor people who are multiplying so rapidly they're devouring the planet's resources? Should they all go?
Yeah.
Indeed. Yup. Some horrible things in this interview. I'm a little speechless. And I think that's a good ending point. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit all for notifications, drop me a donation, like Hunter M, Adrian R, Tom M, and Bobby. Shout outs to you, the most recent Patreon subscriber. Buy my books at bit.ly/heliosbooks. Shout outs to Currykid, most recent purchase of Strategist Guide to Seduction. Once again, thank you for listening to the end. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you next time.